Haifa, Moshe Ben-Akiva, expected on day from MIT, and he will present many papers. On pricing, refunding, equity in promoting sustainable behavior. So it's a kind of new type of policy which has not been discussed here, and we are very anxious to hear you.
Thank you. So please wake up and don't worry. I'll put you back to sleep shortly. And so this morning, Andre asked the presenters to do 4 things. First, describe the problem. Second, describe the solutions. Third, explain or describe what the reasons that the solutions are not being implemented. And fourth, propose ways in which to make the solution implementable. And so I would like to contribute to this 4th question, and because nobody else talked about it, and because that's what I've been working on. And so that's what my presentation is about. It's about pricing, and it's about something called personalization. I will explain. So briefly, the main idea that I would like to talk about is about pricing. The fact that carbon tax is widely advocated, like it was here today, but it is regressive. In many situations, it is unacceptable. It's rejected. And so the response that has been already suggested is to take the tax revenue and recycle them. I'll refer to this as refunding. So take these money that is available, the money that is the revenue from the tax, and distribute it as tax dividend, as an example. Many ways in which it can be distributed. The simplest approach to do that is a uniform refunding. If there is a population of interest, the population that is being affected by the tax or by some other measure, by any measure of pricing, then distribute it equally to every member of this population. And that's a reasonable way of doing it, but it cannot guarantee Pareto improvement, meaning there will still, like from any kind of pricing action or tax action, there will be losers and there will be winners. Usually, the high income, the larger company, they are the winners, and there are people in the bottom, of course, that are the losers. If you have any kind of a uniform distribution, there will be still in the middle people that are remaining at a loss from the policy, from the tax. So what I am proposing to do is personalization. Take the refunding and don't necessarily distribute it equally, but use some criteria, and the main criteria is Pareto improving, meaning distribute it such that there will be no losers. And if there are no losers and everybody is a winner, then it's more likely to be acceptable. So that's the idea. And so if you're not interested in the detail, you can now go back to sleep. Otherwise, please stay with me. So that's what I want to do here. I want to describe approaches to have this kind of refunding solution, and that I will first describe personalization. I'll explain what I mean by personalization and describe an architecture in which this personalization is involved in an entire kind of system of pricing and refunding. Give it a name. The name is Tripop. I'll explain where the name comes from. And so the second part of my presentation would be the methodology of personalization and this architecture. And then I'll show you a computational exercise, simulation model, in which I demonstrate in an application to congestion pricing that there is possible to achieve a Pareto improving pricing and refunding strategy. So now to my second part of the presentation, the methodological part, and then part 3 will be the simulation. So what's personalization all about? I came to this area of personalization in the context of consumer product and services company trying to maximize the revenue, maximize the profit, and using knowledge about the consumers to price discriminate, provide specific targeted information, advertising. And the question is, well, why not use it also to try to influence people to behave better, to do the right things, right? And so that's what I'm suggesting to do here. I'm suggesting to use the same methods that are used by private companies that are attempting to maximize their profits, to apply it to government, to use it by have government use it to improve, say, social welfare. And so marketplace operator monitors behavior. Every time you go on the internet and you are clicking or transacting or reading information, selecting pages, you are a subject of an experiment at some point in time. These companies are conducting experiments all the time. They monitor the behavior, the user, the consumer's behavior. They monitor, conduct experiments, and the purpose of this is to make inference about preferences, broadly speaking, and more specifically about willingness to pay, which can be used for price discrimination. But the methods, I mean, the reason that I became involved in this as an advisor of some startup companies is because my methodological expertise is in discrete choice. And so together with my student, we have developed an online version. I'm not saying that this is what these companies are using. They're using simplified method, but one can take discrete choice, which is often used to study consumer behavior or user behavior or behavior of any kind of entities making decisions offline, meaning collect data, you get the data from wherever you get it, and then develop a model. You want to do it online. And so the same technique, if you're familiar with discrete choice, is something called logic mixture, and you can capture heterogeneity, inter and intra-consumer heterogeneity, and you can quantify, using these methods, willingness to pay by having observation over time, having people making choices, and maybe they participate also in experiment. And then every time these information is being stored, upon login, if you log into any website or any app, you immediately, your information about the user and the user preferences is being retrieved. And then as the user continue to make choices, the preferences, the estimate of preference of that user are updated, and they can be updated also periodically using pooled data. So any time there is an electronic market, the market operator can very easily, using readily available data, infer individual specific willingness to pay, and that's critical. So that's what I have to say about personalization. It's done all the time. And why not do it to modify people to behave, to do the right things? That's my opinion. And that's what we have been doing in some research oriented towards sustainability. And in doing so we realized that when you put it together in an overall analytical framework, and you want to do not just to optimize the tax, to optimize the system, but you also want to perform personalization, you end up using 3 types of analytical capabilities. prediction, optimization, and personalization. So we realize that this trinity of prediction, optimization, and personalization repeats itself in all these applications, will be applied in different cases. And so that's where we came with TriPop. So the POP is for prediction. And why prediction? Because we're always trying to influence what will happen in the future. The future may be 10 minutes from now, the future may be next year, but we need to predict what will be the system state in this period that we are trying to influence. Optimization is kind of obvious, right? Many of you talked about efficiency. That's what the meaning of efficiency. And then, as I said, personalization. The idea of personalization is that every user that we are dealing with an electronic communication, electronic transaction, and the user that is willing to receive the refunding, the benefit of the refunding, needs to also agree to be connected electronically. And so there is customized information that can be provided, there are recommendations that can be provided, and there is also can be personalized pricing and personalized refunding. So the kind of refunding that I will talk about is either credits, I'll come back to it in a moment, or dividends, but there are other ways of personalizing pricing actions like discounts, rebates, etc. So the architecture that I talked about realizes that there is actually two levels of optimization. Given the policy, and if we treat every member of the population in a customized way, we need to have some sort of an objective that we want to optimize in some way at the level of the individual. At the same time, there is an optimization done at the system level. That's efficiency that other people have already mentioned here. So we talked about these, I can move the cursor, so these two-level or bi-level optimization. There is optimization at the system level, like what should be the tax, and there is optimization at the user level. But at the system level, we also want to define the policy or optimize the policy on how personalization will be done. You may think that why not already, if you are doing optimization, why do it at two levels? If we know who the individual users will be, then let's develop that optimize for every individual. We know the willingness to pay of every person. We can fix the price for every person. So the idea is that for practical reasons, computational reason, and fairness reason, we would like to, at the system level, define a policy, and then the policy will govern the optimization at the level of the user. So for example, if we take the carbon tax as an example, the policy can be that you have to declare your disposable income, and there will be a reward, the dividend will be calculated on the basis of disposable income in a certain way. That is the policy. The idea of fairness here is that we don't optimize for every person or for every individual, business establishment, for example, but we, at the system level, optimize the policy. We define a policy that then will be applied as an individual approach the system to get the refund. Then the policy of refund is applied. So the flow of information shown in this graph, graphic, is the system optimization, where, say, the level of the tax is imposed, and the policy, the tax policy, as well as the funding policy is established. This goes back to the user level. It is applied at this level, and the individual, for example, receive refunds. It affects their disposable income, which will affect what they do in the future. And so this is a user experience. So I assume that there's some communication with the users and some tracking of the users, and this is the choices made by the consumers are then goes back to the system, to the back end of whatever app or website they are using. This information is being used to update the preferences on this particular user, and the information about all the user goes back to the system level for the system level optimization. So this is a periodic kind of architecture computation that needs to be done, say, in the case of carbon tax, maybe monthly or annually or whatever. And I have now more information about what each level optimization. So as I said, the system optimization is prediction-based. It's done, it's optimized for the future. It's performed periodically, and it determines the optimal pricing and optimal refunding policy. At the user level, at the user level optimization, the user is detected upon login, and the preference of that users are then known, and the optimal refunding is being calculated for this user, whatever is the policy, whatever is the objective function. And normally, in order to maintain credibility, when the user enters the system or in the user app, the app behave in the user's interest to give to the users the best information, the best refunding according to the policy. So that's basically the idea of bi-level optimization. And bi-level optimization is a concept in optimization, but here it's applied differently, not at the same time. And the idea is that the system optimization is done periodically, and the user optimization is done whenever needed. Whenever the user requests such information to be calculated. So I have more slides on the system optimization, what's the input, what's the output, but I think I already went through it, so I'm going to skip it and move on to, there's here about the objective function. The objective function could be multi-component. Already somebody mentioned here that there could be different objectives that could need to be combined, etc. So I'm describing an architecture. I'm not specifying what the objectives are going to be, but when I come to the third part of my presentation, I will. And that's, as I said, the user level optimization. It receives information about policy from the system level. It has information about the historical transaction and preference estimate of the user from the database, and the output will be, for example, the refund or the dividend. And the objective could be consumer surplus, as an example. So this concludes my presentation of the methodology. The idea is we came up with this platform or overall framework, which we call it TriPop, and we find out that there are a number of applications in which there is efficiency is a key concern at the system level, but we want to involve also personalization, and we want to do it in a way that is fair by the users. All the users are subject to the same policy, but not the same treatment. They can get a very different refund, very different information, customized to that user in a way that meets some system objective or societal objective. So now I have an example, maybe it will to make things more concrete. So the purpose of this computational case study is to demonstrate and evaluate alternative refunding strategies. And so they're called here instruments. So there'll be different instruments, including no refunding. So one of the cases will be just a carbon tax, or in this case, it will be a congestion toll. A toll is imposed on the users, and there is no refunding. And in that case also, there are winners and a lot of losers, of course. But application to congestion pricing, as I said, pricing is clearly an effective way of managing traffic or travel, and usually equity issues prevent the widespread adoption of congestion pricing. So the same thing that applies to carbon tax. So the idea is that congestion pricing, or the same as carbon tax, will be more acceptable if it is accompanied by refunding such that everybody benefits from the price with refunding. This is Pareto improving. And as I said before, uniform dividend redistribution of revenue is not guaranteed to be Pareto improving, and I'll show it. And so the solution, as I already stated, will be to design a Pareto improving personalized refunding scheme. And we're going to test here 2 ways of doing it. Also mentioned already here today, the first one is just a dividend. So people pay the price, and then the revenues are used to calculate dividends, personalized dividend, and the money is being sent to the user. The other one is tradable mobility credits. So the idea is the same as the emission trading systems. There is an endowment that is distributed. The endowment, we call it often tokens or credits. We'll just call it credits. They get credits. The credits have market value. The market value, of course, change over time. So the endowment that they receive is the number of credits times the value of a credit. So, but the key is tradable, meaning that the users that do not need to use the entire endowment, elect to keep the money, can then sell the credits. Users that want to use more buy the credits. The same idea. And so here just describe the credits. So the dividend is obvious. The credits is basically, I'll just repeat it, although I think that you probably are familiar with it. A regulator allocates credit to users. User use credits to pay for travel. Selling and buying credits in the market, so there is a market. So we have to establish how does the market operate as well in order to do a computational case study. It's not enough just to model the behavior of the users in traveling or in consuming energy, but also how they behave in this market. And so the demand and supply for credits in the market determine the price of the credit. And so the advantage is there is no net financial flow from users to regulator, equity benefits, even under uniform endowments, even if the number of credits given to each user are the same, even then there are equity benefits. But there could be losers. Not as many, but there will be losers. So it's more efficient than pricing. It's more efficient than pricing if there are uncertainty, but I'm not getting into that in this presentation. So we needed to design a market, and there are all kinds of behavior in the market that will be counterproductive, like if people begin to speculate or hoard of these credits. So we came up with all kinds of restrictions and conditions. The credit expire, the credits are distributed in kind of continuous time, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go through the list, but we spend a lot of time making sure that we have a market that operates in a way that avoid undesirable type of behavior that we did not want there to happen in the market. I don't know if this has any implication to other markets, but for the case that we analyzed here, we think that this is sort of a market design, a mechanism design that makes a lot of sense. Okay, once we design it, we can then perform this simulation experiment. The context is a transportation network. People make a choice about to travel or not to travel, or which mode to use. They can option another mode. But given that they are using the road and need to pay the toll, they have a choice of time of day, and the toll vary by time of day. And there's congestion is a supply side, there's a bottleneck, and so the users are heterogeneous. We do simulation, micro-simulation, we simulate individual users. The users are heterogeneous, they have different willingness to pay, different incomes, and so we generate a reasonable description of the heterogeneity of the users, and we have a model given all these stochastic effects that represent the heterogeneity, the model that predicts their choice. And there is as I said, on the supply side, there is a network with a bottleneck only for the road, and there is a step toll. Step toll means that there are periods in a day during which the toll is changing, and we have an optimization algorithm that defines the optimal step toll, meaning what are the optimal steps, time of day, and what are the tolls. So it doesn't change continuously because that's sort of unrealistic. And then there is an iteration, like day-to-day, as if there is like day-to-day learning, solving for equilibrium. The model, so there is a demand model. It's already after 6, so I'll try to speed up. So basically, as I said, the demand model is the user as a utility function. Utility function is a function of the attributes of the alternative and the remaining income, disposable income. And the disposable income is the income plus the endowment, or plus the refunding, minus what they pay for the use of the road if they pay. And so as I said, the pricing policy is a step toll by the time of day. The objective is social welfare, and the social welfare is calculated by, we know the utility for each user, right? So we simulate the individual users, and we have a money metric utility, so we can calculate the change in utility between the no-toll system. We have the same users being simulated when there is no toll, and then simulated again with a toll, and then with one of the refunding schemes. And we have 6 of these refunding schemes that I'll explain in a moment. So we can calculate the change in utility in dollar terms for each user, and we can calculate the revenue to the toll regulator, and then the sum of the two is the social welfare. And so that's just to describe, the previous slide described the calculation of the surplus, the consumer surplus, and this describes the calculation of the revenue for the regulator. Very trivial. And then there is a dividend policy, or the allocation policy. So it shows here only for dividend, but the same applies to credits. So the personalization is by personalizing the dividend. That's the uniform distribution. And so so we have now two possible instruments. We can have pricing or credit, right? Or tradable credit scheme. And we can have uniform. Uniform, in this case, will mean everybody gets the same dividend and everybody gets the same number of credits, the same allotment of credits. And or we can have personalized. So I'll describe in the next slide the personalization criteria. And so this means, given the toll, given the user behavior, we can estimate the available revenue, the total revenue to the user, which is available for distribution. Okay, so how do we do the personalization? We find here 3 possibilities. And one is Pareto improving, which is identify the losers, because we know for each user we calculate their surplus. If the surplus is negative, then they're a loser. And so we know who are the losers. And so just compensate the loser, make them whole. And that will be, and then we can get, so Pareto improving. So for users with losses, distribute dividend credits to each user that brings his or her net benefit to 0. The other approach, we call it welfare maximizing. We know that welfare, that the marginal utility depends on income. For the lower your income, the greater is your marginal utility. So we basically estimate all the low income users bring their disposable income up to a threshold using all the revenue. And the hybrid is a combination of the two. First of all, make sure that there are no losers, and then the remainder distribute in according to income, brings the income up to a threshold. And so that's the idea. If we have enough revenue to cover to pay all the losers, then it's already Pareto improving, and the rest is just extra benefit to the users, makes the users more willing to accept the policy. And so we conducted experiments. In the experiment, we changed the capacity of the bottleneck, we changed the level of heterogeneity, we changed the effect of the income effect in the utility function, and what's most important is the instrument, the sixth instrument. So the sixth instrument that we're testing is the first one. The base case is the base case is no pricing, right? And no tax. Then we have a pricing with no dividend, kind of the conventional way of doing it. And then we have 5 other ways of doing it. Pricing with uniform dividend, pricing with personalized social welfare maximizing dividend, pricing with personalized hybrid dividend, it's a hybrid policy, and tradable mobility credit also, where the credits are distributed uniformly or distributed according to the personalization criteria. So we have a total of 5 possibility, and no refunding, so 6 instruments. And when we look, first of all, we look at the revenue versus the losses. And in every case that we looked at, the revenues were greater than the losses. And we try to make it realistic. And clearly, I mean, if this is going to be an attractive policy, then if the price makes sense from a social efficiency point of view, from social welfare, then there are more revenues than there are losses. So that's the first thing to show. So we know we can find a Pareto improving solution, and it exists. And but then when we compare the efficiency on these 6 different instruments, we find that there are some difference in efficiency that I'm not going to talk about. It's in the slides, our discussion. It's in a way that one can understand, because the disposable income affect behavior. So therefore, there are some small differences. What you see here on the slide are 3 levels of congestions. And you can see that all the instruments, different refunding, without refunding or with refunding, the social welfare is approximately the same. So it's not a question of efficiency. The refunding, it changes very little, the efficiency, at least in this experiment. And most interesting is what happened to the distribution. So we are trying to look at individual and how the policy affect individuals. And so the way you represent it is some sort of a Lorenz curve, but in this case, it's a Lorenz curve with negative values. You essentially take all the consumer surplus of all the individuals and sort it, and you get these Lorenz curves, which are shown here. So it's a Lorenz curve that begins at 0, but can go down. And as long as it goes down, it means that you have losers. If the Lorenz curve goes only up, then it means that there are no losers. So what you see here is that for no refunding, that for no refunding, about 60% of the users in this example are losers. And so, but with uniform refunding, there still are some losers. So this is an example. You see here, there is shown here, like only this area of the Lorenz curve immediately after the origins are expanded here. And so you can see that unless that even with uniform, it is better, the equity effects are mitigated, but there are still losers. So to eliminate losers completely, the Pareto improving strategy, meaning cover the losses first, is the only way in which the Lorenz curve does not go down. And so that's basically what we wanted to show, that with personalization, it's possible to have a Pareto improving refunding. So pricing with refunding can be made to be Pareto improving, and can be done using the personalization approach based on this hybrid approach. This hybrid approach, of course, requires that we know we estimate the utility function of each individual based on their behavior. And so acceptability of pricing or credits, right? We distinguish between pricing and credit. These are just two mechanisms to make to recycle all the revenues. And so pricing and credit, they have the same type of behavior, meaning that the Lorenz curve goes up with the hybrid allocation. So acceptability of pricing or credits to promote sustainability is more likely to succeed if accompanied by Pareto improving personalized refunding. And finally, I want to thank Andre, you awake, for organizing it and inviting me here, because I liked very much the idea of trying to influence inaction to become an action. So I think that a Pareto improving strategy can turn inaction into action. Thank you. And just if I still have the mic, here is a list of, I have a lab, I have a lot of people working with me on these type of projects, and some of the publications are listed here. I did not name everybody here, but PhD dissertations here, postdocs that have worked on it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have time for a question.
Okay, thank you for this inspiring talk. I think, of course, I agree with you that tradable permits for driving, big driving is a good idea, and we only worked at redistributing these in a uniform way. I think what you add is important, that the benefits among the different drivers can be very different, and that's an important point. Now, if I try to translate this into a climate story, then one of the problems that Andre also brought up is that it's very difficult to see the benefits when you drive. You see, you will be able to drive more continuously, less delays. But in the case of climate, you will have benefits in 30 years, in 100 years. Those will be the benefits. So rephrasing a little bit your story, I would say how to allocate the losses in a more, or the immediate losses or the short-term losses in a more equitable way, because that's actually what we are doing in terms of politics. Thank you.
Good question. I mean, it's in the case of, and of course I thought about it already, and so as if I invited this question, in the congestion tolling example, there is a time savings. So the person who is paying for the time saving. And then your question is, what is the taxpayer, the carbon taxpayer, paying for? Well, they are paying for the use of the carbon. They are willing to pay. I can estimate their willingness to pay for the carbon. That's a benefit, whatever they are willing to pay. Because a user that reduces their consumption of carbon that tells me that they are not willing to pay whatever the market price of the permit is at this, or the credit is at this point in time. So by tracking their consumption, or meaning not consumption, tracking their emissions and how their emissions change as a function of the prices, I can estimate their willingness to pay. So that's a benefit. Yeah, but the response
the price is the same for everybody at the start, and then the question is, of course, are you ready to pay for less to reduce your consumption?
Yeah, I get your point. You have to have price variability, right? That's your point. So yes, price has to change, and so you can conduct experiments, or when you introduce it, you start low, and you raise it. And sometimes you reduce it just for the sake of the experiment. So that's what market operators nowadays do. They conduct experiments. You know, I worked as an advisor for two market research kind of internet companies that do this. They design these experiments. They conduct experiments, and they don't tell you that you're the subject of experiment, but you do it all the time, you know.
Two more. Okay. Two more questions and then my quick comment. Robin.
Yes, Moshe, very, very interesting talk, and I'm familiar with some of those publications, and we can discuss after the conference about whether...
There is one of the names listed is an obscure professor that came to visit us. And he's standing here on the stage with me.
Yeah.
He's on the list.
Yeah, whether the tradable permits are indeed more efficient under uncertainty. But in any case, my question was this. Is your dividend or redistribution system incentive compatible? Right? You say you do the initial simulations, and then you identify the losers and you adjust what they get. Well, their decision involves a mode and a departure time, and might they not change that in order to end up better off after the adjustment? That's one question. The other one, early in your talk, you mentioned about...
You know what, can I answer this question?
Okay, yeah.
Because I know the answer, so otherwise, who knows what's come next. The idea of the personalization, that it is done based on a model. It is not based on what you necessarily do or what you say you will do or have done. So the idea is that for every user, based on their behavior and behavior of users like them, we have developed a model. And so the model is the way you calculate the dividend or the credit. So if you begin to say, I'm going to use public transportation, or I'm going to pay now all these tolls, and in order to influence my willingness to pay, the idea of the estimation process is not going to respond immediately. You'll have to behave strategically for a long time for the model to follow you to where you may want us to believe you are going. Okay, so anyhow, so the idea is strategic behavior is taken into account by developing using all the data, including data from other users, to estimate your preferences. And then the model is used to calculate your credits or dividends.
Okay, well, I'm not sure how that works, but I better give time to the...
sorry, I stopped you in the middle. I stopped you in the middle of your second question.
Well, it had to do with...
During cocktail, we take a last question by Luca, and then we go to the conclusion. You have two chances.
Thank you. Actually, my question was almost the same as Robin.
Can you speak up?
My question was actually about almost the same as Robin's question. But so if I understood correctly, you said that strategic behavior is not possible. But still, if we, in the maybe unrealistic case where we know perfectly the model that you use, and we have a group of individuals that can still exploit the system so that they will get more incentives or smaller price in the end.
I mean, the refund or the dividend or the allocation is based on identifying users. So whether or not you're a user and what's your extent of your loss is based on a model, right? And the model, to some extent, is based on your behavior as well, but it's based also on behavior of people like you. So if everybody applies some sort of strategic behavior over a long period of time, then if that's the way they want to behave, then that's the way we will determine who is a loser and who is not a loser. But the key is that the calculation of the dividend is based on a model that is estimated statistically based on pooled data and customized for you based on, this idea of posterior distributions. But that's more technical. But the key is using a model.